Hello and welcome to the Hoop Collective podcast. We talk about the NBA, which we're doing on Tuesday afternoon. And I'm very happy to introduce, joining us from just outside Chicago, Illinois. I say outside because he's very proud to be from the suburbs. He's not from the Loop. He's from the suburbs. I want to be acknowledged. Our new teammate and new member of the Hoop Collective here at ESPN, Shams Charania. What's up, Shams?
Brian, Ramona, appreciate you. I feel like this is a long time coming, so I'm glad we're able to do this. And you know that about me. I am up in the north suburbs. It's quiet over here. I can lock in and just stay focused. And when I got to deal with the rowdiness of the city, I'll go to the city. But I like the quiet. Just keep me out. Just keep me out of where the action's at. I just want to be in the shadows.
Well, joining us from the north suburbs of Los Angeles, a little area called the San Fernando Valley, where she's a very proud Valley girl, Shams, is Ramona Shelburne. What's up, Ramona?
How you doing, Shams?
I
am from the 818.
Ramona knows this. I've known Shams when were you 17 or 18 when we met?
So I think I'll never forget it was Chris Birdman Anderson. He was sitting in the locker room and this goes to show that I had no idea. I was so naive. I didn't know. I just wanted to get interviews. I didn't know how people were. I didn't know the right protocols of anything. So I remember he was just sitting there on reading a book, and I just went up to him and just interviewed him. And I want to say that was when he was as part of his 10 days. So it was at 2013.
Okay.
So I think I was 19 years old. So
okay,
18 or 19 years old. So
did Birdman give you an interview because he didn't really like talking to the media?
I don't see. This is stuff I did not know. I had no idea.
That's good. Ignorance is bliss.
I think early on, naivety helped me a lot because I didn't know the rules. I just knew that I wanted to get in this and I wanted to interview players. I wanted to interview execs, and I just wanted to get in the fray. And I didn't know how anyone was perceived. I had no preconceived notions because I didn't know anything. I didn't know anyone that was super green. Sometimes I still feel that way, but I have a little bit more of a sense. And now I think more. I overthink more than I definitely. Sometimes I wish I had the naivety that I did back then, but that's just experience and that's life.
So Ramona, I met Shams in Milwaukee. This story's out there. There's been stories written about him or whatever, but he couldn't get it. Even though he was with a real media outlet, the Bulls wouldn't give him a credential. That's out there. You can find. So you come up to Milwaukee. So I met him in Milwaukee, and I don't remember the player that you interviewed. I don't think it was Birdman. I think it was somebody else that you must have interviewed that night. And I saw you doing the interview, Shams, and it was outside the locker room. You had got the guy outside the locker room, which is a veteran move, not something you see from a 19-year-old. And so Ramona, I watched him do this interview. I couldn't hear it, but I remember watching him going, oh, that's interesting. And then the next, the day late, I think it might even have been the next day, he turned around this story. And I don't remember the player, Shams. I don't remember the story, but I just remember that the story was very nuanced, not done by, because he introduced himself to me that night. The Heat were in Milwaukee, and look, I got used to.
What was he wearing? Was it suited and booted?
It was appropriate. Whatever he was wearing was appropriate.
No, I noticed what young reporters wear these days.
Okay.
That's why.
Are you going to lecture? Is this a lecture?
No. I do get up on that high horse.
I stay with my suits.
Suits,
even though now I do dress a little bit more casually for shows and sometimes studio shows and things like that. But at games, I usually try to always be in a suit. That's what I started.
Shams, you've been seen in leather. You're known to wear very nice leather. Let's just be honest. I know that you wear
leather jackets. Yes. Let's make that clear.
Yes, leather jackets. Sometimes you've got that chic look, especially when you're in LA. All right, so Ramona, I see him do this interview. I wish I could remember the player. And then he was working for or stringing. I mean, it wasn't a full-time job. Do you remember what they were paying you, Shams?
It was good for a couple meals.
Okay.
Couple meals a month. Yeah.
All right. It probably didn't even cover the gas to Milwaukee. But anyway, so he does this interview, and the next day I read this story, and I was like, because he had introduced himself to me. He was like, "Hey, how you doing? My name is Shams." I think he gave me his contact info. I took it or whatever.
Yeah.
I was like, okay. I think I was polite. I don't know, but I really didn't regard him. I wasn't trying to be mean, but when you're covering the Heat and you're on the road, there's a lot of stuff. There's always a lot of people around. So I read, and the story was on one of the Bucks players, and I read the story, and I was like, this is done by somebody who's kind of has an idea what's going on, and I instantly was like, wait a minute, I met this guy. And so I then messaged him and I was like, that was not bad. And so ever since then, I've kept track of Shams and known Shams.
I will say this, and that was a point in my career where like I still feel like I don't know what I'm doing. But back then I definitely didn't know what I was doing. I was making these drives to Milwaukee and Indiana, 3.5, 4 hours to Indiana, an hour and a half to Milwaukee. And you're doing this in the middle of like your friends are going to parties, there's other events going on, there's dates, there's study, you have to study for school. And this is what I was doing. But sometimes I would be driving home from these games. I'm like, what am I doing right now? Like, seriously, I'm like 18, 19 years old. And I'm like, I should be doing this with my friends. I should be like I really was totally in this life. And I remember when Brian gave me, like, he emailed me and said that about my work. And honestly, that was all the validation I needed to just keep going. And that validation, and to me at that point, I felt I was vindicated. I'm like, all right, cool. I actually know what I'm doing. Brian, this is someone who I had high regard, and that kept me going for a little bit longer. And I'm like, what, I actually might know what I'm doing. And I just kept pushing, and I kept going to games.
So Ramona, for the next 90 seconds, we're gonna pretend like Shams isn't here. Okay.
Okay.
So Shams would come to Indiana when the Heat were playing the Pacers in these big playoff series, like all these times ago, and Shams would drive down to Indiana. So like, I think that might have been that same year. It was one of the Heat Pacers playoff games, and there were 3 of us sitting in a row. Shams was sitting, and then Woj, and then me. Shams went to the bathroom or something, and I pull Woj aside and I go, "This kid is really, really good." And Woj is like, "I know." So at that time, Woj was at Yahoo, I was at ESPN.
Yeah.
And like Woj and I had like a 5-minute conversation about him. Like Woj was all over him too. Like he already knew about it. And like he hired him like a year later.
Do you remember when you and I were working on a story together, Brian? I forget who it was. It was some kind of like Lakers Bulls trade or something. And the only person we were worried about beating us was Shams.
Oh my God, Ramona.
Which trade was this? I can't remember.
This was a big moment. This was a big moment for Shams. So
this was when I learned about Shams.
Right. Okay. So we are working on it was a Lakers Cavs trade.
Okay.
No, it ended
Which
up
one?
being
Which one?
Well, it ended up being a Luol Deng trade.
That's
right?
what it was. Okay.
So, but the Lakers and the Cavs were talking about Pau Gasol. Okay. Ramona had the Lakers. I had the Cavs, and like, and I knew people at the Bulls. I knew they were discussions with them, but Ramona and I were like all Shams. I don't know.
I didn't know about this one. I didn't know about this one. I didn't know about Pau. That's the untold story. You guys need to tell that story. I didn't know about Pau Gasol.
Well,
I was landing in Dallas. I think I was covering them in Dallas.
They were negotiating.
Yeah.
This was
this is an untold story.
This was for Andrew Bynum. Bynum ended up going to the Bulls, and then they cut him. It was a salary cap move. It pissed off Joakim Noah. Anyway, for like a week lead up to the trade deadline, Ramona and I got this trade wired. Like, she's got sources. They're talking about Pau. I got sources in Cleveland. They're talking about, they're getting out of Bynum, blah, blah, blah. We are all over this story. Okay. And there were the Bulls were trying to get out of the luxury tax, blah, blah, blah. So I don't know if I've ever covered trade negotiations to that point in my career where I was that wired into a story.
Yeah.
And Shams comes in over the top of us and beats us.
I know.
On Luol Deng.
And we were like, who the hell is this kid?
No,
and
I knew who he was.
I said, who is this kid? And Brian says, I know who this is. This is the next great NBA newsbreaker. And I was like, what's going on here?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. All these years later, I'm sorry about that. I didn't.
It's okay.
But that was a big moment for me, I will say. And the crazy part is, it just to give you guys a sense of my like mindset. The next morning, I was driving to Milwaukee doing a sit down with Klay Thompson. Like, I was always like on to the next. Like, that's what my mental. I think that night I went from like.
So you didn't spike the ball. You didn't be like
no. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I think I yelled at my house.
Little happy dance.
Yeah, no doubt.
Okay.
I was a sophomore in college. I'll never forget it. In January 2014, and I was I think I was watching a movie after doing a paper, an essay, and then I mean, again, I was always on to the next, but that night for sure, I think I went from like 700 followers to like 7,000, and it was like, all right, the door just like slightly cracked open.
No, I credit him. I reported the trade, and then I was like, wait a minute, Shams, he got it. And I had been following him, and I like I like retweeted him and was like, Shams got it. Like, I was like, here he is. This dude got it. So yeah, that's right, Ramona. I forgot about that. Thanks for bringing up a time.
I think I was like flying from LA to Dallas for something. I must have been doing something.
You guys need to do the full podcast on the Pau Gasol part of this. I didn't know this, so that's crazy.
Well, they couldn't make a deal.
They couldn't make a deal, and then he left as a free agent anyway the next year and went to Chicago.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't know. You know how like all these stories. I saw Mark Cuban just told a story like this week where he thought he had traded for Kobe.
I've never heard that one.
I was like, how many people almost traded for Kobe? But 2004, 2007, the Bulls, the Mavericks. Like, by the way, did you as a quick aside, Ramona, since you're here at the Lakers, did you see what that trade was? It would have been Jason Terry and
it's like Jason Terry, Josh Howard.
I know. I was like, what?
Bad trade.
What are we talking about? Thank God Mitch Kupchak said no.
Like, somebody called Mitch Kupchak up and give him another bonus for not agreeing to that trade. They won 2 more championships after.
There's another one of those trades in Laker history where Dr. Buss almost traded James Worthy for like Mark Aguirre, I think. Do you remember this one?
So I have some insight. All right. So this is the way I've heard the story.
Okay.
It was James Worthy for Sam Perkins.
Sam Perkins.
And the story that I heard by people involved, was that there at the time Jerry Buss owned an indoor soccer club.
Yes, the Lasers. And I know them.
And the Mavericks owner Donald Carter owned an indoor soccer club in Dallas.
Okay.
And there was some star in the soccer league. He had like one name. I'm ignorant. It's like, he went by like, Mauricio or
Figo or Kike.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
And he was part of the trade to the Lakers. It was going to be Sam Perkins and this soccer player.
What?
Jeannie apparently was running the soccer team.
No, Johnny was running the Lakers.
Oh, Johnny?
Johnny,
yeah. Well, I heard
Jeannie never ran the soccer team.
Jeannie was running the tennis team.
The tennis team, that's right.
All right. And they agreed on the deal. And the story that I heard was that Jerry West threatened to resign.
I did hear that part too.
Did the deal, which Jerry West likes. He used to like to threaten to resign.
He did that every other day.
And look, all these people are all dead now. Who's gonna deny this story? Jerry Buss called Donald Carter, the late then owner of the Mavericks, late Jerry Buss, and said, "I'll do the deal because we agreed on it, but I'm just gonna let you know it's gonna cost me Jerry West." And Donald Carter, Shams, I know this is why you came on this pod for 50 years.
Definitely. Yeah.
I'm listening intent. I want to hear the end of this.
Donald Carter let Jerry West out of the deal for James Worthy and for Sam Perkins and the soccer player. And Sam Perkins went to the Lakers as a free agent the next year anyway.
Okay. So here's what I'm going to do. I am going to find out the real version of this story for you, Brian. I will ask James Worthy, and I will ask people in Lakerland who will still remember this, and I will find out. And at some point, we will do like a little bonus pod.
All I will tell you is the person who told me this story was involved in the negotiations.
I believe that
they may or may not still be with us. But they may still be with us.
Yeah.
And I've always heard this story, and it was an amazing story. James Worthy was almost traded for Sam Perkins, and was agreed to. The way it was told to me was agreed to. And then Sam Perkins left and went there as a free agent anyway, which is not going to cover the Mavericks' history and glory. But
wow. Okay. On that note, I'm going to let Shams be the star of the show here with you, Brian, on the Web Collective. But I will text you later when James Worthy tells me whatever version of that story he knows.
Please do. And tell James I said hello.
I will.
And then the bonus pod can be you guys talking about the Pau Gasol to the Cavaliers trade.
And then we're going to have a whole series, Shams, 1980s trades that almost happened. It's going to blow up. I mean, all of our listeners are so in tune to 1980s trades. Okay. Thank you, Momo.
Bye, guys.
So Shams, one of the big things you're working on right now, next Tuesday, is next Monday? Monday.
Yeah.
Next Monday is the deadline for rookies from 3 years ago. I think the 21 draft class to sign their extensions. A number of them have, Evan Mobley and Cade Cunningham and Franz Wagner. We haven't seen the spate of sort of the middle tier guys sign. Monday is the deadline. You're working on all of these, I know, because we're staying in touch. But the kind of thing that I'm feeling, and now as I'm about to say this, watch like 6 of them sign. I'm not so sure that these teams are super amenable to much negotiation right now, because next summer there's not a lot of cap space out there. There's not a lot of threat to these teams. And so I don't know how you're feeling, how these negotiations are going to go, because we're really in the last week of them. We're really in the nitty gritty.
The negotiations that I see right now are between teams throwing money to these players that in their mind, this is a lot of money and this is a level of stability for you. But there are a lot of whether you're talking about the Jalen Greens, the Jonathan Kumingas, the Jalen Johnsons of the world, Trey Murphy, I guess you can throw in there as well, that have, a feeling of where they feel like they may be at value wise and what they feel like they can get in the open market. And right now, this is the reality of it. Anyone that is this late in the negotiation process, this late in the summer, the off season, I guess, before the deadline, none of these players are max contracts right now.
Yeah.
All of these players that are up for
they
negotiation,
may think that they are. They may think that they are, but they're not going to. I agree. They're not going to get.
But in terms of the extension right now between Monday, I mean, I think Sengun is probably the closest player that you could think of out of this group right now. Potentially, him, Kuminga, Jalen Green. You look at production wise, Jalen Johnson could have a case, potentially as well. But like you think about the players that are there right now, all of them could, I guess, make a case, but their teams aren't at that threshold with the players. And Sengun was a guy who put up great numbers last year and was thought of to be an all-star snub. But those conversations that Houston is having with Jalen Green and Alperen Sengun, they haven't been around full max out contracts. If they were, they would have been signed already, or they would have been offered already. And I think Houston and like these other teams as well, the Golden States with Jonathan Kuminga, they're more, if you want to go out and earn it, perform, get the offer sheet. And Brooklyn right now is the only team with significant cap space next summer.
Right.
And they are in a position in a rebuild. Sean Marks has been very public about that they're in a rebuild, and they are in a situation where you look at the roster. Cam Johnson, he's going to be a trade candidate during the year. Dorian Finney-Smith, another guy that's going to be a trade candidate during the season. And if they go into the summer with the same amount of cap space, I do think they will be in the game of offer sheets. When you think about when Sean Marks took over in Brooklyn, you think about the Alvin Crabs, the Tyler Johnsons, all the sheets that they Otto Porter was
Otto Porter, yeah.
The max that they gave him. And that's the level of flexibility that they're going to have, that they're positioned to have this summer. So I do think that they are looked at in the space as an offer sheet team, but an offer sheet for who? If a couple of these guys get off the board, do they want the crop of guy that's left? Another guy that we haven't talked about is Josh Giddey. And he's someone that, I think the Bulls will engage with. They made that trade with Alex Caruso for him. So they clearly value him to an extent. But what does he want? What is his mentality on the marketplace? And what do they want to give? That is the push and pull that we're going to see between now and Monday. And you're going to see the more serious conversations happen closer to the weekend as we go into Monday. But I think there are multiple players out of this group of guys that certainly believe if they test this market and they go into free agency next year, that they're going to get more closer to a max contract than where that number is at now.
Right. And we also could see teams, as the course of the year goes along, open up more space for next year. There's a few teams that are flexible. The Spurs potentially could have space, for example. Giddey's an interesting name. And well, first off, we have two teams that have two guys. The Warriors have Moses Moody and Jonathan Kuminga. So they're negotiating with both guys. And, maybe one gets it and one doesn't. That's happened in the past. Also, the Rockets you mentioned with Jalen Green and Alperen Sengun. We'll see. They may be a cap space team next year, or they may not be, because they've got Fred VanVleet's team option. They've got a lot of things that they're trying to decide. But Giddey is an interesting case study on why it's hard to get a contract extension done right now. He was traded for by the Bulls to ostensibly be their future franchise starting point guard. Like, he went to when the Thunder told him that he was not going to be their starter, he said, well, then I think we could work out a trade. The Thunder were like, okay, our bar is going to be really high. They canvassed the league. They found a deal for Caruso. They made the deal. When he came there, the Bulls were like, yeah, we see you as our starter. That's why he wanted to go there. So he's like, okay, now pay me like a starter. But they've got Lonzo Ball coming back. And like, maybe they will pay Giddey between now and next week, but like, how is Lonzo going to look? Like, this is, what if Lonzo comes back and looks great? Like, that may affect the way they do things. So, he has no history with the team, and he was a much more limited role last year with the Thunder than he would potentially be with the Bulls, where this year he could put up huge numbers. So it is always a thing. Years ago, this agent I really respect, Shams, gave me this lecture. And of course, you know what the agent wants. The agent's going to want the guy signed now. But this agent gave me a lecture about the value of getting a guy under contract, that even though you might hurt your cap space, or even though you may pay a little bit extra money, that you're going to get something extra for that money. You're going to get a happy player throughout this year. Over the course of time, I would say that while at the moment I thought that was BS and I rolled my eyes, I do think there's something to that, because if you don't get a guy under contract, it just weighs on him. But in this moment where teams are dealing with these aprons, I think they're more willing to be uncomfortable than pay the premium to get the guy under contract.
Another thing that I've heard in the last few days is every dollar, every million, obviously every $1 million, but every dollar literally matters in this new collective bargaining agreement. And you think about a team like Houston that's you have the Alperen Sengun cap hold. It's not a big cap hold. So you think about the flexibility that exists in 2025 in the offseason. Do you push it? Do you kind of make your offer so that where it's going to go? Where Alperen Sengun is valuing himself. And if you can push it to 2025, it's kind of this, wink, wink, potentially with both sides, understanding where they're going to be as an organization come summertime. But, in the case of Josh Giddey, I think you're totally right. I think he's a guy that could have great numbers this upcoming season. And then if you're the Bulls, it's like that balance, what he could be, what he's going to look like when he's going to have the ball in his hands and he's going to be your starting point guard, versus, not overpaying a guy like that in their estimation right now. But in the case of Lonzo Ball, I do think they're going to bring him along really slow. Very curious to see how he looks, of course. For him to even make it back after 2.5 years is remarkable.
It's a crazy situation.
And I said it on NBA Today yesterday. He would be the first player in NBA history to successfully come back from this cartilage transplant surgery. And I think it's been done in soccer before, but not in the NBA in this league. So seeing if he can come back, how he looks when he comes back, of course, that's going to be very interesting to see. But I mean, Josh Giddey, the way he plays, it kind of reminds me of the way Lonzo Ball played initially, pushing the ball ahead. And Zach LaVine, you saw the other teammates say, we know our hands have to be ready because Giddey's going to be pushing the ball ahead. He's going to be running the floor. I mean, he's had some preseason games already with 5, 6, 7 rebounds. Like, you can very easily see him averaging between 15, 16 points, 6, 7 rebounds, 6, 7 assists. And then it's like, okay, where does that land you as a restricted free agent next year? Does a team like Brooklyn give him a sheet?
Yeah. So 2 names that I keep hearing as I talk to agents and teams: Emmanuel Quickly, because he got a 5-year, $175 million contract over the summer from the Raptors. And these players are like, well, look what Quickly got. The guards are like, well, he's a starter level player. I'm a starter level player. Pay me in that vein. The other, what you hear is the contract that Jaden McDaniels got from the Timberwolves last year, which was 5 years and like in the $128 or $130 million range. There's a bunch of sort of big wings that are out there in this market who were like, okay, that's the standard that I want this year. So, I don't know how you feel about that Quickly contract. That Quickly contract has sort of set the market. And I don't know how you feel about the McDaniels contract, but the McDaniels contract was signed before the aprons were in effect. So those are 2 contracts that are being referred to a lot and are looked at sort of the break-even line for some of these agents. Like, I can't have my guy get less than Quickly got, or I can't have my guy get any less than, Devin Vassell got a similar contract to McDaniels as well. Like, those seem to be the ranges that we're talking about. So $30 million, $25 to $30 million ranges. So big money, but as you mentioned, below the max. And when you're in that high level range, that's where the negotiations are. That's why we're in there. That's why there's a lot of scrapping right now.
I can't tell you how many times I heard the Devin Vassell and Jaden McDaniels contracts being used last season when they did those deals, yeah. and then this year as well in this whole cycle of restricted free agency, or extensions. But I mean, listen, all of these guys, if a max deal was on the table, they would all do it right now. The fact
Right.
is, these teams just are not valuing them as that. And some of these players, and I know for sure multiple guys, will likely just wait until the summer and just bet on themselves and essentially
That's what happened with
say,
Quickly. Quickly last year was
yeah.
a Knick. He was a high level reserve for the Knicks. They offered him whatever they offered him. He said no. Next thing you know, he's got 175 million. So if you're looking for inspiration, you don't got to look back to 2019 or something. Look at what happened with Emmanuel Quickly, and what happened with Emmanuel Quickly is probably what's slowing down Josh Giddey, because Giddey's in a sort of a similar situation is in his role change.
The numbers Josh Giddey could put up by the end of this season, you could look back, and if this guy's averaging 18, 19 points, 7-8 assists, 7-8 rebounds, at that point, I mean, where is he looking at? What is he saying? And then he's been shooting the three ball better in preseason so far. Obviously, he did it. You were there at the Olympics. He was shooting the three a little bit there as well. So I'm curious to see how his situation plays out. But really, all of these guys. I mean, Jonathan Kuminga, Jalen Green, those two were the much heralded players in that draft class. Obviously, taken very high. Jonathan Kuminga went 7. Jalen Green went in the top 3, went 2. And so when they're looking around and they see Cade Cunningham, Franz Wagner, Evan Mobley get max contracts, they can. Jonathan Kuminga just averaged 19 points, 55% shooting, 38% from 3-point land from January onward last season. So, and obviously he's looking into taking the next step in his career this year. And you've seen him so far in preseason. He's been shooting the 3. I think last I checked, he was like 10 of 18 from 3 so far in preseason, and he's been taking them very, very confidently as well.
Yeah. So you'll be be on TV a lot over the next week. Shams, thank you for coming and joining us here on the Hoop Collective. You're always welcome. We'll be seeing you more. I look forward to working on set with you. I haven't seen you in person yet since.
I know, man. I think the last time we saw each other was when it was either obviously during the finals. Obviously, I saw you in mini, but during the playoff run. But I appreciate you always, and we'll be on here very soon.
All right. I knew you when, man. So I'm glad to have you as a teammate. And thank you very much for coming on the Hoop Collective.
Spoken into existence.
All right, man. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, B. Appreciate you.
All right. Thank you so much to Shams. Ramona, we have a little magic of editing here. We made Jackson work. Ramona, don't tell anybody this, but Ramona actually did her part first, and then Shams joined us later. So here's the part where I started talking to Ramona before Shams came in. Okay, Ramona, you are just back from Denver where you're working on a bigger piece that'll come out later, but you spent a couple of days with the Nuggets, including going to their game that just took place on Sunday against the Suns in Denver. The first thing I'm going to say is there's two things. Well, a few things happened that night.
Yeah.
One of them was Michael Malone basically said his whole team, maybe not his whole team, but a bunch of his team was out of shape.
Yeah.
He said, I played all my starters through the third quarter because everybody in this league is too soft and nobody conditions. Well, we got a condition.
Yep. I mean, Brian, this is a team that just got off the plane from the Middle East, right? 15 hours. Right. And they've been back in town a couple of days. And so, you figure like, they're going to be a little jet lagged, but then again, they were playing like the third string of the Phoenix Suns, like no Devin Booker, no Kevin Durant, no Tyus Jones, like no Bradley Beal, and they still lost. And it was mostly because they gave up 37 points in the third quarter. And you saw there was this couple of plays where you saw Jokic running down, trying to give chase, but he would throw his hands up, try to deflect it. Like, come on, man, what are you doing to me, coach? But this is also what happens when you go to the Middle East. You're the team that starts earlier. You have the weird travel. You have all these off days, and so I think their flow is just a little messed up. But I never mind a coach on the third preseason game calling his team soft. Third preseason game. I was like, hello.
Well, he called the whole league soft, particularly his team.
Yeah.
The whole league in general. He was a wide swath. But then I think, more concerningly, if you're a Nuggets fan, Jamal Murray came out of the game early and with a soreness in his knee, which Mike Malone said was, quote, it felt funny, which ironically is not funny. I don't like when knees feel funny. That's pretty important, don't you think?
I thought so, especially for a guy that you just signed to a max contract who's coming off a pretty bad summer, right? I mean, you were at the Olympics. He did not
Long
play
story short, he
well.
couldn't make a shot. He couldn't
Yeah.
make a shot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And some of that obviously is, he was coming off a long season. He's playing alongside Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, which is not a perfect fit basketball wise for Team Canada, but still, he couldn't make a shot. I think that was a disappointing summer for all involved. This was the game that you wanted to see Jokic and Murray. This is their, I guess, home opener, first game back at the Ball Center. And they looked pretty good in the first half, but I thought that Murray coming out at halftime, I don't think he suffered any kind of injury. The way Michael Malone described it was, usually if it feels funny, he can kind of loosen it up during warmups and then he's fine, which, I'm in my mid 40s. I know what he's talking about there. Like you wake up, your first 4 steps are, a little funky and then you warm up and you're fine. But I'm in my mid 40s and I don't have to play professional basketball, right?
You don't have a max contract that hasn't
I do not. And so I think this is, especially for a guy who has had injuries in the past, who last year, I think, I don't think he got enough credit for the amount of injuries he was playing through. Like he was really never healthy last year. And so, yeah, I'd be a little concerned. But because it feels like one of those season long management things, like they're going to have to, keep him feeling the right way all the time. And I don't think this is just working himself back into shape or he felt funny one day. I think this is something they have to manage.
Yeah, I think if you're a Denver fan, you probably have a little PTSD from Michael Porter when he signed an extension in the preseason.
Yeah.
Jamal's extension was in, I think, late August, early September. It didn't just happen. But Porter signed an extension like right about now. And then, shortly thereafter, less than a month, needed another back surgery. As someone who's had multiple, you had multiple back surgeries?
Just one.
Thank God. I hope it stays that way.
Thank you. We'll knock on
wood. It felt like 2.
Yeah.
That was still that sort of derailed right after they celebrated him getting his max. And so you're just shaky, especially because in all honesty, there's so much talk about the Nuggets supporting cast. And by the way, in that game on Sunday, Julian Strother hit a bunch of threes, like 5 or 6 or 7. He had a bunch of threes. That was a really good sign for them. There's so much talk. And, on this pod, we've talked a lot about how are they going to replace KCP. At the end of the day, the Nuggets need Jamal Murray to be great.
That's right.
If you look at the year they won the title, Jamal Murray was great. The year they made the run in the bubble to the conference finals, Jamal Murray was great. In between, he had the knee injury that affected 2 postseasons. At the end of the day, Jamal Murray is a transformational player for them. He's not their best player, but he's their most important player. And so that issue, above all else, Jokic is going to be ready to play. He's going to produce. But the Murray thing was really a key factor for this team.
And I think, one of the ways that, it's sad when somebody is as great as Nikola Jokic and we almost take their greatness for granted. This happens with LeBron too. Like you just forget
Steph Curry.
Curry, like when somebody is that great, you just assume they're always going to be that great. And you kind of forget how much goes into it, how much goes in. Because like I saw Jokic the other night and I said, how much time did you get some downtime after the Olympics? Because everybody always talks about him, being in amazing shape, but then really disengaging, right? He goes off to Sombor, he goes fishing, he goes whitewater rafting, and you see those videos on Instagram. He
goes dancing,
and then he's with the horses in the barn, and you feel like he's just totally off the grid. And I said, how much time did you take off after the Olympics? And he was like, he obviously carried a pretty heavy load for Serbia. He said about a week, literally about a week, and the message was, I don't like to get out of shape. Like he wasn't because he couldn't take longer. He doesn't like to get out of shape. He doesn't like to he said too loose, I think was his phrase, which is a funny choice of words. But I think that's how hard that guy works to be as great as he is. And so you have this, maybe the most valuable resource in the NBA, right? The best player in the league the last 3 years. He's won a bunch of MVPs to cite that. And then obviously at the Olympics. And so you needed Murray to unlock him. He's going to give you everything. And he's been, and I'll knock on wood as I say this too, he's been remarkably reliable. But I think if you're Denver, they don't have a lot of margins now because of the new CBA, because of the box they've gotten themselves into, and it's not their fault. You kind of have to when you have good players. But they had to pay Jamal Murray. They believe in Jamal Murray. I think there was no wavering on their part in terms of, were we going to give him the max? They didn't blink when he had a bad summer. It's kind of funny when you like. And at first, they were almost criticized for not giving him the max extension before the Olympics. And then when he had a bad Olympics, they get criticized for giving him the max extension, right? But it comes down to, they believe in Jamal Murray. They always have, because they've seen.
They have to.
Yeah,
they have to. That extension is a tough thing. What were they supposed to do?
Right.
And by the way, like they let KCP go so that they could take care of Murray, and I believe take care of Aaron Gordon. There's no extension done yet, but I think the Nuggets want to extend him, and Aaron Gordon wants to sign an extension, and there's a certain limit that he can go to. It's not the max, so it would be, he's limited because of his contract. He's already signed one extension there.
Yeah.
He's won there. He went through a terrible loss earlier this year, lost his brother. His story is, he's got his own story.
Yeah.
I think eventually they're going to get Gordon under contract. But they had to, Ramona, to make their team to remain a championship contender, they have to bet that Murray will be right. And they have to do what they can do to make sure that he's right. Like they didn't really have a choice. There's no trade that they could make and get back a player like Jamal Murray who fits next to Jokic. That's just the end of the story.
It's the end of and I think that, like, when you say they have to, I agree with you there. But I also think, like, when you talk to Michael Malone, I mean, I've sat there and listened to him wax poetic about Jamal Murray, like when he'll have a shooting struggle, or when he went out with his knee injury the first time, like they're like brothers in arms. Like, they have this really deep, abiding loyalty to each other. And I think, that if this is the guy, what's the expression? Dance with the one who brung you. I mean, that's where they are. And I was getting a lot of the same feeling I had in Golden State after they had won, and there was this movement to, okay, we're all going to be the Spurs. We're gonna have our core players, and then we're gonna bring along some of the younger ones, and they're gonna take over, and we're gonna have this run of 10, 15 years or whatever. Like the Warriors tried that. It didn't really work. They had all those lottery picks, and you could say Kuminga is the success story there, or Podziemski, right? But I don't know if either of those two are primed to be the next Steph, the way that Kawhi was primed to take over, right?
Right.
But I think the Nuggets are trying some version of this too. Of this, we have our core four, and we're trying to bring along the next core four, and however much Christian Braun can contribute, and Strother and Peyton Watson. And I mean, they really like some of the other younger rookies and younger players that they're developing. But I think it's a hard, nobody but the Spurs has actually executed that. Right. I mean, you can look at, I guess,
and even their plan. I mean, they had a great run. Their plan, fall started when Kawhi left.
That's right.
If Kawhi had kept playing there, Kawhi won another title elsewhere. So even the Spurs, who quote unquote did it all right, not even their transition was flawless. Not that I feel bad for them. They had the Duncan run,
20 years. Yeah.
But I'll talk about Russell Westbrook.
Yeah.
One of the more remarkable transactions in the offseason, Westbrook going to the Nuggets. I've spoken to some folks in Denver, and one of the things that they say about Westbrook is that, their team, their guys are not super vocal leaders. Like that's Jamal is not afraid to speak up, but that's not really who he is. Obviously, it's not what Jokic is.
Yeah.
It's definitely not Michael Porter. KCP, not afraid to say stuff, but certainly not like the guy who gets in the middle of the huddle. Westbrook has absolutely been that. Like his energy is completely different. And so regardless what he can bring on the court, which is been the topic for now years on end, probably 4 or 5 years of controversy about what Westbrook can get on the court.
Yeah.
the folks around the Nuggets are talking about the mood shift and the vocal shift and how he's come in and kind of been a breath of fresh air, because they basically had sort of stoic, awesome players and really young guys who didn't say anything because they were sort of along for the ride. And Westbrook comes in there completely with a different energy. Now, I don't know what that's going to equal, but I think they like that energy that he's bringing, and they like the competitiveness that he brings to practice, because, you know, like, their practices have been their practices. You know, really the most fiery guy on the team has been Malone.
Right. He's the bark. I mean, he's the bark and the bite, you know, like he's calling this guy. I mean, he's saying we need a condition, and he also in that press conference said, we just can't guard one-on-one at all. This is the third preseason game, but listen, Michael Malone has been there 10 years.
Yeah.
10 years. Yeah. And I think when a coach has been there for a long time, and he said 10 years of Jokic and 10 years of Murray, you got to find a way to keep it fresh, right? Like, you got to find a way to, the same guy yelling at you for 10 years. Like, they have a bond that you can only have from playing together for that long, but also winning a championship, right? And he's stood by them through thick and thin, right? Through the good times and bad. But then there's this new guy who comes in, and I don't know if you saw this I don't know how far this made it around the socials, okay? But there was this very delightful, there was a delightful social video of Westbrook timing Jokic's run from the locker room to the court, okay? So Jokic is coming around the corner, as he does, right? And he's sprinting, but he's like funny sprinting.
What does he say? The thunder. I'll bring the thunder. Whatever. I sound like an old man. I don't remember what he says, but there's like one thing he said in Portland last year. Yes, he does that ridiculous run out to the court.
The ridiculous run. And Westbrook's sitting there timing him. And he goes, come on, 25, 26. And then he gets 29 seconds. And it was very cute, you know? And then they pulled off a really fun lob. It was like Jokic to Westbrook for a lob. And Russ can obviously still get up. He's still an incredible athlete.
Yeah, he is not. I am not at the Nuggets, but I'm guessing that Westbrook is not one of the guys who's out of shape. I don't know if he's been out of shape a day in his adult life.
No. And and I will say this. I think there is a respect between Jokic and Westbrook that goes back a number of years. There's some storytelling in and around that I haven't completely fleshed out, but I think that there's been a couple of chances over the years for the Nuggets to add Westbrook, and starting with when the Lakers were going to trade him the first time, and then he ended up going to the Clippers on that buyout, right? And then the following summer, I think Denver has considered adding him several times over the years, mostly because I think Jokic just likes him. He thinks his game is going to go really well with his. He likes the idea of of playing with an athlete like that, where you can see what he does with Aaron Gordon, how he sets him up. But Brian, there is going to be a fun thing to watch in Nuggets games. Okay, what Russell Westbrook is so fast, and when he gets the ball in transition, like Michael Malone wants them to run, especially if he's going to be with the second unit. I think that'll be fun. But if Jokic is out there with him, I mean, you talk about a trailer, right? Like, Westbrook gets out there and he's 10 steps ahead of everyone, including the young guys. And I saw Jokic tip in like 3 layups already, like three misses or 3 rebounds or whatever. Like, it's going to be a fun dynamic all season long with those two.
Yeah, I think the drawback, the Nuggets need 3-point shooting. They need outside shooting. And, Westbrook, I know that he has moments where he may have a good week or a good month, but in general, he's not proven to be adept. And really what they need is volume 3-point shooting. And because they were one of the bottom few in volume last year, and they lost KCP. The last thing you want is Westbrook. I mean, you may like Westbrook taking catch and shoot open corner threes. You may, I think those numbers aren't terrible.
Well,
but you don't want him taking volume, I don't think.
So Michael Porter Jr. is going to be the volume guy, right? And he's actually come back in very good shape. I saw him the other night. They
do think he's in a good place physically.
Yeah, and I think Peyton Watson, when he gets healthy, he's got a hamstring going on right now. But I think he should be healthy. It didn't seem like it's going to be a long-term thing. But I think that's a guy they're really hoping makes a jump and can help them 3-point wise. But Christian Braun is another guy that they'd like to get his 3-point stroke going, because they believe in him so strongly as just a basketball IQ guy, but a defender and making the right kind of plays. He's a prototypical player to stand next to Jokic. He just needs to get the shooting up near where KCP was.
So speaking of 3-point shooting, the team that was in town
Oof.
that night, as you mentioned, when you were there, were the Suns. And the Suns have had a lot of travel in the preseason. They've been to Michigan and back. They were in Palm Springs against the Lakers. Were you there that night?
Yeah, caught them that night too. Yeah.
That was you were in Palm Springs for the Bronny.
Yeah, the first one. I show up and Bronny plays his first game. I had impeccable timing.
That's what he was waiting for. I think that's well.
And not his 20th birthday or anything. Okay.
Had nothing to do with it. I don't know why you would bring it up. But in that Suns game, as you mentioned, that their star players didn't play. But I would be remiss if I didn't bring up something sort of interesting that's happening in this preseason with the Suns' first-round draft pick, Ryan Dunn, out of Virginia. Now, preseason, the preseason is paved with broken. It's like the boulevard of broken dreams.
Yeah.
I've been around long enough to not overreact to anything that happens in the preseason. That said,
let's overreact.
Ryan Dunn, how many 3-pointers did he make at Virginia?
He had 5. Oh, he was 7 for 35 last year at Virginia.
I think that's 20%. I did not excel in math. I didn't go to Stanford, Ramona. I think that's 20%.
That's 20%. You got it.
He made 6.
Yeah.
Just that night. And look,
he's 12 for 27 in the preseason. His entire career at Virginia across 65 games, he was 12 for 51. That's 23.5%. So he's basically 44% in the preseason, which is like double what he was his entire career.
Yeah, and so his role is to be a 3-and-D player. So there was a video that the Suns put out on their social media about a month ago.
Oh, yeah.
Video of their war room on draft night.
That was noted in Denver, too. Yes.
I'll bet it was. Because Denver, they had negotiations. Jackson is chiming in. He never made a 3-pointer against Syracuse. That's right. Those Orange wouldn't allow him to get
Oh, my God.
Great defense as always. The reason that was interesting in Denver is because there was a trade that the Suns made where some of the negotiations between Calvin Booth and Josh Bartelstein with the Suns, Calvin Booth, the general manager of the Nuggets, you couldn't hear Calvin, but you could hear basically the negotiations that they had to move back in the draft. The Nuggets moved up in the draft, and the guy that they took, unfortunately, tore his Achilles, I think. I can't remember if he tore his Achilles.
I saw him in Denver. He looked pretty good, though. He was already back on the court.
Yeah. Okay, good. But anyway, that was bad luck for them. But anyway, you see the moment where they're deciding on Ryan Dunn, and like you hear what Mike Budenholzer was saying. It's like, yes, I want him. He's my guy. And like they were all excited that this was their guy. Now, I have yet to see or hear on draft night about a team drafting guy going, well, that wasn't our guy. But we saw the moment that they were going over it, and like they were very excited to get him in a draft where there wasn't much excitement, especially late in the draft. This pick was like in the mid to late 20s. I don't know. I'm just going to point out, as you say, he's got 12 threes. He's got as many threes in 3 games with the Suns as he had in his whole college career. I don't know what to say, but that's happening.
It's pretty good, right? And look, I already had a good feeling about the Suns when I saw them in Palm Desert. I walked in and Tyus Jones was there, and I go, gosh, Tyus Jones is like, how the hell did they get Tyus Jones? Like
the whole league is wondering.
I mean, this guy should be making 3 times as much money, but it's
maybe more than that. Yeah. I mean, yeah.
And I think he had other offers where he could have made more, but this is the proverbial, best situation where he can.
It's like a gap year for him.
Yeah.
He's sort of trying to reset his value as a starter. I mean,
that's right.
Not everybody in the league saw him as a starter.
Mm-hmm.
At least I shouldn't say that. Not everybody in the league wanted to pay him starter point guard money. And so clearly nobody wanted to pay him starter point guard money. Otherwise he'd have taken it. And so now he comes to a place where he knows he's going to be the starter, and there's going to be a good team, and he's going to give you great opportunities. He's betting on himself.
And by the way, they desperately need a point guard. What did we say every single time about the Suns last year?
Right.
If you have to ask who's the point guard, then you don't have a point guard, right?
Correct. That's right.
Devin Booker shouldn't be the point guard. Bradley Beal shouldn't be the point guard. Can they do it? Sure, but should they? No.
By the way, Monty Morris, who will be their backup,
Yeah,
he had a great game the other night.
he did.
He basically was a non-factor for the Timberwolves after they traded for him. He wasn't. If he might have played a little bit in the playoffs, but he wasn't a key contributor. But he's trying to rebuild his value as a high-level backup in the league, and so he had a great game the night you were there as well against.
Royce O'Neal had another good game, and I think like when you look at the Suns last year, they were like the team that everybody was looking to because they made the Bradley Beal trade. They had the 3 stars. And then I just think they didn't have enough depth. They didn't have enough size. None of those guys were hurt at the right times, right? They all got hurt. They staggered their injuries all season long, so we hardly ever saw them together. But they all seem healthy now. There's a whole year of playing together, and they really seem to like Mike Budenholzer. He seems refreshed, I guess is the right way to put it. When I saw him the last couple of times, he looks lighter, like he's had a nice gap year.
He definitely lost weight.
A nice gap year. He had time to think about things. And this is home for him. Obviously, he's from Arizona, so this is a real homecoming for him. And I just think they seem to really like having a different voice in the room. They seem excited. But there's only one holdover from the staff, which is David Fizdale, he's known Bud for a long time as well, and I think he has a good relationship with a lot of the stars. And so, they feel like the team that was supposed to win their first year didn't, and we've all forgotten about them. But if they stay healthy and they've these guys that are having good preseasons, and Tyus Jones does what we think he can do in that point guard, well, that's an interesting team this season because they're not getting the same kind of pressure and attention they had last year.
So you've also spent a little bit of time around the Thunder, I think. The Thunder are playing the Nuggets tonight as we're recording this podcast.
Tuesday.
So we'll see how they play. The Thunder have had a very low profile in the preseason. They're only playing 4 games total, and one of them was against the New Zealand Breakers, which I don't know what we learned in that game. I'm not sure we learned anything. But I was there for media day where the Thunder wanted, if you can fly under the radar as a Western Conference favorites, they have tried to. Jalen Williams, I think, has had when he's been out there, he's looked really good in the preseason. We've seen some Isaiah Hartenstein rebounds and floaters, and we've seen some Alex Caruso plays. This is a team that has absolutely everything, but they don't really want to draw too much attention to themselves. And so far, so good. But I think when the games start counting, we're going to start noticing the games pile up in the win column, and they're not going to be able to avoid it.
I mean, for a team that actually finished as the 1 seed last year, they're getting and had the runner-up in the MVP voting. Like how are they not favored everywhere, right? Like how are they not getting attention? And I think it's because they, as you say, they sort of actively tamping down on things. I really like what they did this offseason. I think they, you got the heft that they need with Hartenstein. They needed, Chet Holmgren's a great defender, but I think they could use another big body in there when they play the Jokic's of the world, especially in the Western Conference or Minnesota is another team that'll be difficult for them to go through. But I think that the feeling that I got being around the Thunder just for a bit there was Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's not going to be flying under the radar anymore. I mean, for a guy who finished second in the MVP voting, it's hard to say he was under the radar, but I think he might have actually had a better chance to win last year if he wouldn't have got hurt that last month of the season. He sort of missed the campaign window, right? And we talk about the last 30 days or the last whatever. He was out for a lot of that, and so his campaign to sort of build that he just wasn't on the court. And Jokic was a deserving winner anyway, but it took away the debate. I think he's ready to own it this year. I think he's ready to kind of be that new face of the league. And at some point they'll lean in, right? They'll lean into the attention like they did before.
I mean, it was, I've talked about this before, but they really I don't think the word championship, I mean, maybe you could pull out some sort of throwaway line. I don't remember any of their players using the word title or finals or anything like that. They were actively avoiding getting into that. And look, they made the second round last year and they got beat. It wasn't like a supreme end of the season. But like there's under other circumstances, if this team was in, I don't know, I don't even want to compare it, but in any other circumstance, this team would be like being talked about nonstop. They like where they're at. By the way, we talk about this class. They drafted one of the most talented guys in this draft in Niko Topic, who is out this year because he had an ACL injury. Who's like not even he's just sort of out over on the side. Like they are so deep that they were able to use a lottery pick as a prospect. As a flyer, basically. And like I was talking to another executive, and we were talking about like Cason Wallace, who was, he made my all rookie team last year. I'm not sure how many minutes he's going to get, but I was talking to another executive who was like, if he was on some teams, like some rebuilding teams, he'd be regarded as an untouchable. Like if he was on the Wizards, like if the Wizards had drafted Cason Wallace instead of Bilal Coulibaly last year, Coulibaly I think went 8th, Cason Wallace went 10th or 11th. If that's what the Wizards had taken right now, like you couldn't call the Wizards about him. They'd be like, no, you can't have him.
Yeah.
Not that you want to compare the Thunder and the Wizards about many things, but the guy who might be the 11th man,
right,
or the Thunder, and so. Like, but the back end of the roster is not what we're going to focus on. The focus is on the front end. Like, I think Jalen Williams could contend to be an all-star this year. So Shea is an all-star. He's a first-team All-NBA player. Chet Holmgren could contend for, I don't know if I want to say that, but Chet Holmgren has that type of ceiling. Jalen Williams might be there. Alex Caruso is an all-star defender. He's on the all-defensive team. Like, the talent on this roster is immense. So, like this game with the Nuggets isn't really super relevant, and I don't think Jamal Murray is going to play.
It is the opening night game though too for both these teams.
They play again on opening.
Yeah, on the 24th. Yeah,
that's right. So maybe they won't show anything. But I think Oklahoma City it's just remarkable how little how little attention they've given.
Well, they really talk all the time about not skipping steps. Like they didn't, I think they're way ahead of their own internal schedule. Like I think they thought they were going to contend in a few years. This rebuild that they were going to have was the longest of views. And then all of a sudden Shea took a huge jump and Jalen Williams was awesome right away. And Chet, has come back faster and better than people would have even expected.
Played all 82 last year.
Amazing. And I love that he takes pride in that too. Like I saw him last year. I remember seeing him in LA. He had a shiner in his eye and he's all beat up and he was like, I'm playing. Like he was, because people think because he's skinny he's not going to play, but he's a tough guy.
Right. He wants to prove that he's tough. He doesn't have to, but he does want to.
But there really are. I mean, look, you and I covered the first iteration of the great Thunder teams, that with Westbrook and Durant and Harden.
Sure.
And there's a lot of similarities. I mean, look, put Kevin Durant next to Chet Holmgren, stand them side by side. There's a lot of similarities there. I mean, obviously Kevin Durant's an all-time great. He's one of the best players ever. But they look alike. They have a similar type handle and game. And Shea as the Russell Westbrook, and then Jalen Williams is sort of the kooky offbeat guy, but also is a really good scorer and a really good player. That's the heart in there. It's interesting how history kind of repeats itself. I mean, you could see Shea and Russ walking at Fashion Week side by side, even if you wanted, right? I don't know who would win that walk off. Is that what you call it in fashion?
That's an interesting question.
Yeah.
If you asked Russ who has better fashion, him or Shea, that one meme where Russ goes, when he kind of, that would be, maybe he'd say, Russ, who's got better fashion, you or Shea? He'd give that. You mentioned process. Nobody said championship, but almost every player said process. That
I
is
know.
that
That's
has
the
been what they
word.
say. Process, process, process. So, all right, Momo, you've got to get going. Thank you for stopping by.
You are welcome.
We will be talking to you later in the season. And good luck with your Nuggets piece. And we look forward to reading it. When
You
it
know,
comes
I
out.
feel like I had some good training running through the Denver airport this morning.
Oh, really?
You know me and my airport running stories.
Well,
But it was at elevation. It was elevation this morning. Yeah.
Was the train broken? Because the train is always breaking at the Denver airport.
It was the doors would not close. You know, no, I was like, guys, we gotta go. We gotta go.
The train in Denver is
Always.
always broken. It's like the worst. And
I know.
I've honestly avoid Denver now sometimes because if you have to connect with terminals, you have to take the train. And you, of course, the security is I don't know. Nobody cares about these travel stories. All right,
I will
Momo.
say I was proud of my run through the terminal though. I did not stop.
How close are we talking about this? How close did we cut it?
Well, let's just say I was the last passenger board, and the gate agent had already tried to close.
Many times in the airport, paging passenger Shelburne, Ramona, Shelburne. People are like, "Isn't that ESPN woman?" Well, she would never be late to the. She would never
at the
be
Denver
late
airport, I would be, and I know better too. Don't you know better?
Yes, I know better. I'm never.
I know better.
Thank you.
I enjoy it.
By the way, last week I was on a flight to Denver.
Yeah.
And it was late because the flight attendant overslept.
Oh.
It was a 6 a.m. flight. The flight attendant overslept, and the gate agent put the flight attendant on blast. She was like, "We're missing a flight attendant." She's like, "I don't want the hateful stares while you're all going to miss your connection." And so the flight attendant got there like 20 minutes late, and she had to do the walk of shame.
Oh,
like
man.
Everybody at the gate just glaring at her as she walked
glaring
by.
at her. I felt like it was a triumph when you make it, though. Isn't it a triumph?
Well, the plane couldn't leave without her. I mean,
that's true.
She
they would have left
without
me.
To miss it. Yeah. All right, Momo.
Bye, Brian.
Okay. Thank you so much to Ramona. Thank you so much to Shams. Thank you for watching and listening to the Hoop Collective and joining us 3 times this week. Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays going forward. The Tims will be back on Friday. Jackson will always be here, and we will talk to you soon.